What happens when one signature changes a country's political future? And one of Zimbabwe's most prominent constitutional lawyers says it is a betrayal of the people. Zimbabwe has once again been thrown into the center of a heated political debate after convener of the Constitutional Defense Forum, Tendai Biti, strongly condemned the signing into law of legislation, extending President Emmerson Mnangagwa's term of office until 2030. Describing the move as a complete betrayal of the people of Zimbabwe, Biti has made it clear that, in his view, the constitutional changes represent a serious departure from the principles upon which the country's constitution was founded. His remarks have immediately reignited political debate across Zimbabwe, with supporters of the new law defending the reforms, while critics continue questioning their legitimacy. Stay with us, because this story is about much more than politics. It is about Zimbabwe's constitution, democracy, and the future of the nation.
Why could none of these mechanisms work to stop this move towards this amendment?
Firstly, these African dictators, none of them ever say they want to mutilate the constitution. They always say, I'm forced, the people wanted it. And Mnangagwa has proved that he was no exception. Secondly, the process of public consultation was marred with violence, was marred with coercion. Only 67 meetings were held across the country in 67 venues. People were beaten up there in broad daylight. Harare lawyer Doug Coulthard was assaulted in broad daylight. Professor Love Momaduk was assaulted in broad daylight. I and my team have had our offices blockaded, our people beaten up, our people in prison. Students have been imprisoned. So autocracy has been the order of the day. Fascism has been the order of the day. They are refusing to take this bill to a referendum. Yet the constitution is very clear that if you want to remove term limits, you have to go to a referendum. If you want those term limits removed or to benefit you as an incumbent, you have to go to a second referendum.
For months, Constitutional Amendment number 3 remained one of the most debated issues in Zimbabwe. The proposed changes divided political parties, legal experts, churches, civil society organizations, and ordinary citizens. Supporters argued that the amendments would strengthen governance, improve long-term planning, and create greater political stability. Critics, however, warned that the reforms would fundamentally alter Zimbabwe's constitutional framework and should not move forward without broader public participation. Now that the legislation has been signed into law, the political debate has entered a completely new phase. Instead of asking whether the bill would pass, Zimbabweans are now asking what these changes will mean for the country's future. Among the first high-profile voices to respond was Tendai Biti. The veteran lawyer and politician did not hold back. He described the legislation as a complete betrayal of the people of Zimbabwe, arguing that the constitution exists to protect citizens and limit the concentration of political power rather than serve the interests of those holding public office. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe for the latest Zimbabwe political news and analysis. Also, tell us in the comments where you're watching from today. Are you watching from Zimbabwe, South Africa, Botswana, Zambia, the United Kingdom, the United States, Australia, or somewhere else in the world? We'd love to know where you're joining us from. According to Biti, Zimbabwe's constitution was created after years of national consultation and was intended to reflect the will of the people. He believes that major constitutional changes should always place citizens at the center of the decision-making process because the constitution belongs to the nation, not to any individual or political party. His criticism comes at a time when constitutional issues continue dominating national discussions. Supporters of the legislation maintain that Parliament debated the amendments and approved them through the country's legislative process before the President assented to the Act. They argue that the reforms were introduced through constitutional procedures and are intended to improve governance and provide greater continuity for national development. Those supporting the changes also argue that governments need sufficient time to implement long-term economic programs, infrastructure projects, and institutional reforms without frequent political interruptions. But Biti and other critics see the situation very differently. They argue that constitutional reforms affecting the highest offices in the country deserve the broadest possible public confidence because their impact extends far beyond one administration. According to critics, the Constitution should remain a safeguard that protects democratic principles and ensures accountability for generations to come. That is why Biti's remarks have generated such widespread attention. His statement has become one of the strongest public criticisms since the legislation became law. Across Zimbabwe, reactions have been mixed. Some citizens agree with Biti's concerns, saying constitutional changes should always receive extensive national consultation because they affect every Zimbabwean regardless of political affiliation. Others support the government's position, arguing that elected representatives debated and approved the legislation through parliament and that constitutional amendments are part of the country's legislative process. Political analysts say the differing reactions demonstrate how deeply constitutional issues resonate with the public. Unlike ordinary legislation, constitutional amendments often generate stronger emotions because they define how a country is governed and how power is exercised. That is why debates surrounding constitutional reform rarely end once a bill becomes law. Instead, discussions often continue as citizens, political parties, legal experts, and civil society organizations examine what the changes could mean in practice. Many observers believe Zimbabwe has now entered one of the most significant constitutional periods in recent years. Supporters believe the reforms provide an opportunity for greater policy continuity and institutional stability. Critics believe they raise important constitutional questions that will continue to shape political debate for years ahead. For many ordinary Zimbabweans, however, the conversation is much simpler. People want to understand how these constitutional changes could affect the country's future. Will they strengthen governance? Will they improve political stability? Or will they continue generating political disagreement and legal debate? Those questions remain at the center of public discussion. Meanwhile, Biti has made it clear that, from his perspective, the signing of the legislation represents more than a legal event. He believes it is a defining constitutional moment that future generations will judge carefully. Whether others agree with that assessment or not, his remarks have ensured that the debate surrounding Constitutional Amendment number 3 remains very much alive. Across social media, Zimbabweans continue sharing different opinions. Some believe the reforms are necessary for long-term national planning. Others insist that constitutional changes of this significance should always be approached with the greatest possible public participation and transparency. One thing is certain, the signing of the legislation has not ended the national conversation. If anything, it has intensified it. Every political statement, every legal opinion, every public discussion adds another chapter to an issue that continues to divide opinion across the country. As Zimbabwe moves forward under the amended constitutional framework, many people will continue watching closely to see how the changes are implemented and what practical impact they have on governance, institutions, and the country's political future. For now, Zimbabwe finds itself at another historic crossroads. Supporters believe the country is entering a period of greater political continuity. Critics believe important constitutional principles have been compromised. And ordinary citizens continue following every new development, hoping for clarity about what these changes will ultimately mean for the nation. The biggest question now is no longer whether the legislation would be signed. That has already happened. The question now is how history will remember this moment. Will it be seen as a necessary constitutional reform designed to strengthen Zimbabwe's future? Or will it be remembered as one of the most controversial political decisions in the country's modern history? Only time will answer that question, but one thing is certain. The debate over Zimbabwe's constitutional future is far from over.